Yes, and we're recording right now. So you're
Hi.
officially now talking to students in Norway, possibly all over the world if people do watch this on YouTube later. But first and foremost, you're speaking to my Norwegian students. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell them who you are and how we've come to know each other and all that.
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Livia. I am a Brazilian Canadian. I've been living in Canada for almost 20 years now. I moved here when I was 24, so I'll let you do the math. I've known Pollyanna since the 90s when probably all of you weren't even born. So we've known each other a long time now. And I met her when I was an ESL student. I started when I was around 9 years old, but I think I had her as a teacher for the first time when I was around 13 or 14. Yeah. And Pollyanna took English classes to a whole new level because they weren't just about learning grammar and or vocabulary. They were also about learning about English speaking countries and culture and entertainment. And I remember always having a lot of fun.
I want you to talk a little bit about the Speaking Up Club and what that meant to you and how that played a part in how you went to Canada for the first time. Because you have
Hmm.
been living there for a very long time, but you did have history with that country. So I want you to tie those ends together.
Sure. Um, so when I was around 14 or 15, Pollyanna started a club um, after school hours called the Speak Up Club, where we would meet in the community to practice what we learned in class. And I remember I started going to the English club just before I traveled here for the first time. So I came here for the first time in 1998 for a short summer course, an ESL course. And I remember it was a bit shocking at the time because so I had the classroom experience where everything is very structured. So if we're asked to pair up with someone and write a dialogue between two people and we're given a theme to write about, everything is very structured and it's very controlled. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's part of learning. Um, that's the chance we have to incorporate grammar and whatever it is that we're learning. But also, it's very structured. So I remember feeling a bit nervous about traveling by myself without my family at 14 years old to an English speaking country where I stayed with a local family and I had to interact with them. I had to ask them questions. I had to know my way around. I had to use public transportation. I had to buy things. um, so it was very helpful at the time before coming here to go out in the community for an evening of speaking English the whole time because that gave me the opportunity to really put the my learning into work and into play and talk about real life things like anything I wanted to talk about, anything I wanted to share with my friends that used to attend with me. I had to find a way. So it gave me the opportunity to learn how to do that, how to talk about everyday things, and have to find the words and have to find the vocabulary. And obviously helped a lot to have our teacher there, because if we didn't know something, we could ask her. And we also had, every once in a while, we had a native speaker of English, people who were exchange students in our city that would come to the English club. So that was very helpful as well. And yeah, it was just an amazing opportunity to socialize, get to know friends who attended ESL with me better, and it was great. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really miss those days.
Those are fun times, and we developed through the trajectory of this entire, I don't want to say a decade, but yeah, it was it was like a decade.
It felt like it.
So we just got to know each other so well.
Yeah.
Livia was in my wedding, so we've
Yeah.
become very good friends. And
Yeah.
this is a part of Brazilian culture as well,
Mhm.
where the teacher is almost like an extension of your family, where you have those
Mhm.
interactions and you become close. And it is very different from other cultures. Speaking of which, I want you to tell us a little bit about the multiculturalism in Canada.
Mhm. So I live in Toronto, like we say here, which is the biggest city in Canada. Um, and it's, if not the most, it's one of the most um, culturally diverse cities in the world. Um, I'm not sure how many nationalities um, live here, but I know there's 150 plus languages spoken in this city. Half, roughly half of the population of Toronto was not born in Canada. So if you have like two people walking side by side, chances are one was born in Canada, the other one wasn't. Or, I mean, I would say the city of Toronto, it obviously it was colonized by um, England. So if you walk around, you will notice like the architecture. Obviously, most people speak English on the streets, and everything can be like can be very like British in terms of like some of the habits and some of the, at least like what I know about British culture. I think it's still it has that um you can definitely see like the cultural aspects of a country that was colonized by Britain. However, if you at any given time get on a subway, get on a bus, or sit on a patio, or go to a concert, like you will hear multiple languages. And so one good example was when I first moved here in 2007. My first job was at an ESL school. I did admin work at the ESL school, and my boss is was at the time originally from Australia, and she used to do every Monday. New students would arrive, and she would do like a small orientation session for the students. And one of the things she used to say was, anyone in this room looks Canadian. That's what she used to say. Like, that's the beauty of Toronto. Everyone in this room could be Canadian. There's no such thing as like, what does a Canadian look like? Like me, like anyone really. And the other thing that is very to me was very helpful to move here as a person whose first language is not English, is that you very quickly learn how to understand all kinds of accents, because every single person you talk to has a different accent, and people will be like at different levels of learning the English language. Some people choose not to, and they only have like the very like basic that they need to live their everyday life, and that's okay. um, so the city is really like a big mosaic, I would say, of like all different cultures. There are certain areas where you can clearly see the influence of some like very specific nationalities. Like there's like Greek areas, Chinese areas, Italian, Portuguese, Polish, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's very interesting. There are many cultural activities, especially now during the summer. Um, Many different festivals where you get to listen to the music, taste the food, and yeah, so a very culturally rich part of the country for sure. I wouldn't say the same about small town Canada. But definitely in our biggest cities, which are Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, those three cities, and some others too that are not as big but are very diverse. Yeah, there's lots of different cultures to experience.
Is it well received by people who are ethnically 100% Canadian, which would be like of British descent?
hmm So I guess there's all kinds of people and all kinds of views, and I guess that is also has to do a lot with um, the individual's political views as well. So just like any other country in the world, there are people with more conservative views, who are very strongly either like against immigration, or they try to make arguments against it, and like the need for Canada to bring in more immigrants. And there's others with more liberal views who can also appreciate and value the diversity. In the city of Toronto, I would say, because it's 50-50, a lot of people um, are either newcomers or immigrated here in their lifetime. And there's also a lot of people who are like first generation born Canadians or second generation. Um, so I think Toronto, generally speaking, is a very liberal city. It's a very progressive city, because there are many like new things happening here and new ideas, and just I guess the diversity contributes to that a lot. But it's hard to speak for the whole country. But my experience living here in Toronto is that yes, it's not only welcome, but it's appreciated. I find people here to be very curious about other cultures. People like to experience other cultures, taste the food, listen to the music, go to festivities, or at least learn about them, learn about different kinds of like religious celebrations, or even if it's not religious, like typical events from all different cultures. At least that's the experience I have in my workplace. When I talk to people, I find that people are very involved in each other's cultures of origin.
A lot of people think that Toronto is the capital of Canada. What would you say to those people?
I would say Google Canada's capital and you'll see that it's actually Ottawa. Yeah, and Ottawa is about, on a good traffic day, about 4 hours away from Toronto, northeast of Toronto. It's much smaller than here, and it's a very bilingual city because, well, the federal government is there. So all the federal um, government employees are expected to speak English and French fluently. So it's a very bilingual city.
That was my next question, so you just answered it for me.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now you are neighbors with the USA, and
We
how are the relations between the
are.
two countries, and what is the perception that you feel in your experience that Canadians have of Americans?
Hmm. Yeah, so we are neighbors. We're very close neighbors. In fact, from my balcony here on a clear day, I can see the United States. It's that close. It's just across the lake is New York State, and we're also not that far from Michigan here in Ontario. I would say, to me, like my experience living here, one of the first things that I, like I are very like relevant is that we are a lot smaller in terms of population. It's like our population is like a fraction of the US population, right? I would say between like 10 and 20% of the US population. So, and that means a lot because I find that, well, COVID, it was proof that our economy, sorry, depends a lot on the US. So when COVID first started and the border crossing became very limited, we felt the impact of that. So we're a country, because our population is so much smaller, there are some things that we simply don't produce here, and they all come from the United States. The only requirement is when things cross the border to be sold here, it has to be labeled in English and French. But a lot of things are manufactured in the States and brought here by truck. And when the border crossing became limited, I remember like right in the beginning of the pandemic, even the PPE supply was very limited. So gloves and masks and things like that, because we didn't used to produce our own. And now we do, but only because COVID happened, right? Um, so there's that. I think our economy depends so much on the American economy that the government of Canada is very cautious when it comes to trading policies. So, we're not in complete disadvantage. um, I know that for the most part, Americans are also perceived to be more outspoken and more aggressive than Canadians. And I find that to be true. I travel to Mexico a lot in the winter, and I find in my personal experience that it's very easy when I hear someone speaking English, North American English, um, even if the accent is not very different, because there are some states in the United States where their accents are very similar to ours. I find that it's very easy to identify who's American and who's Canadian. Usually Americans are louder and more aggressive, like in how they express like their views. And I find Canadians to be more mellow, and we're known to be friendly. Obviously, not everyone's friendly, but we're known to be more easygoing and more relaxed too. I've had people like traveling to both countries, and their comment was that in the United States, they felt like people are always on a mission, whereas in Canada, people feel more like they're enjoying life. And I find that to be quite true for the most part.
That's a very interesting perspective. I had not heard that before. I have interviewed a few other people from Canada, and there were different perspectives. So this is really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Oh,
have
and I have to add, sorry, I have to add the classic one, which is we have universal health care. That's what they say a lot, right? Like, oh, Canadians have free healthcare. It's not actually free, but we don't pay extra for it. Like we pay our taxes and that's it.
That's one major point.
Major.
When
Yeah.
people always talk about it, the Americans talk about how Canadians have this huge advantage over them for that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
now, speaking of the United States, so there has been an event that took place recently.
Mm-hmm.
Former President Donald Trump, there was an attempt on his life, an
Yeah.
assassination attempt. How was that received in Canada?
Um, I have to say I had a busy week and I didn't really have the time to talk about it, but for the most part, um, I don't think people were surprised. Um, just because his policies around gun control. I mean, personally, I find that over the years, he's made many enemies because of some of his views, which are very aggressive and abusive, if you will, against certain groups of people, like very specific groups of people. Um, so I think he's probably collected many enemies, and probably a lot of what he says doesn't sit well with people again because it's very abusive, like very very abusive language, body language as well, and just his policies and what he stands for. And he tried many many times to sabotage stricter gun laws. So I mean, you add the two together, and I think he's a huge part of how um, an event like that is made possible.
Yeah, I hear you. It's been a historic moment,
Hmm.
no matter
Yeah,
what. It's the historical image of him with his fist in the air, fight,
yeah.
fight, fight. So say what you will about the man, he knows how to savor his moment, and that was a moment for him. That's
Hmm.
gonna
Definitely have an
gather.
impact
That's gonna
on,
gather
yeah,
a lot more support.
yeah. Hmm.
So yes, and I have a question that sounds, it almost sounds like a Miss Universe question, but you can answer it in whatever way you feel it fits. And I
Okay.
didn't give it to you beforehand because I wanted the
Ooh,
spontaneity of
surprise question.
it.
Okay. Okay.
So, what would you say to this new generation? People who were born in 2006, 2007, 2008. What do you have to
Wow.
say to them that you think they should know going forward?
Wow. Okay. That's a big one. What do I think they should know to go forward? Can I break it up into like a few points? Okay, because there's a lot I think I would say. So, first and foremost, put your phones down and look around and learn how to be in the moment and appreciate what's around and observe and take note of things. And I say that because I actually feel bad that they were born um at a time where that it's not really optional. Like everyone has phones. Our generation didn't have that. We had like 2 decades. I had like at least 2 decades where no one was carrying their phone around. And it's concerning because there's a whole world around us wherever we go. There's things happening. There are beautiful things, things that are not so beautiful, but it's all there, it's all happening. And that's how you learn. That's how you learn, especially about yourself, which leads me to the second thing. It's, I know it's great to have quick and easy access to people, and it's great to have um, quick and easy access to a lot of information and about what's happening in people's private world and in their lives, but you are just fine where you are doing what you're doing, and don't let other people's lives who are like right there on your screen distract you that much from where you are and where you're trying to get in your own life, which is another thing we didn't have growing up. We didn't know what other people were up to unless we had a conversation with them. So that's so much richer than just having quick and easy access all the time, right? So, yeah, stay with yourself, learn how to be with yourself, not needing the approval of others so much.
Great words of wisdom for the new generation.
I hope so.
Yes, the phones have definitely changed the
Yeah.
dynamic, but a lot of it is for the best. A lot
Yeah,
of it, and
definitely. Like we wouldn't be able to do this right now.
and I haven't seen you in person in like going on 18 years.
Yeah, a long
Because
time.
Skylar was a baby and she just turned
Mm-hmm.
18.
Yeah,
So I want to thank you so very much for doing this. So
thank
you will be a
you.
part. I have perhaps three groups of students who will see the interview. At least two of
Okay.
them will see. They will learn about Canada, about the
Mm-hmm.
world, and
Mm-hmm.
perspective. And thank you so very much for this.
Yeah, thank you. So nice talking to you.
Yes, and we'll stay in touch.
For sure.